So one thing that I found interesting about this play was that characters narrated their fellow characters' actions, and I found this really confusing at first. Once I got used to it, it was a little bit easier to understand what was happening in the play. But also, I'm sure that it made more sense, seeing the play, and it was easier to understand the play actually hearing each individual character narrate other actions of characters. But for me, reading the play, it was confusing. Two values that I identified in the play. The first one was the garden, Ginny's garden, and I think she really uses this garden as a distraction and a way to cope with war. And they mentioned that when she gets back from Vietnam, she, this gives her something to do. She starts planning the garden, and when Elliot leaves for war, she starts planning all these plants, and it's a way for her to cope with Elliot leaving. And also, when Elliot is injured, she also uses the garden to heal her. So, for the play as a whole, it shows that everybody has really their own way to cope with war, and this is Ginny's, is her garden. Military code is also another value that I identify with all the characters in the play because all of them mention it one time or another. So you see military code when, Elliot gets injured, he's trying to figure out, what he should do, and he goes back to the military code. Okay, the military code tells me to call my commanding officer and get a tourniquet and start assessing the damage. And also we see this in at the beginning of the play when Pops and Grandpop and Elliot are going off to war. They're preparing, they're like military code, no bare chests, military code, no dirt on the floor, military code, no bare feet. And so we see military code as a way to survive war as a whole and to keep everything in order. And I think that's a value that is used a lot in order to survive, in order to be able to survive war. Also, another word that I did not know was corpsman, and this is mentioned when Elliot is injured in the Iraq War. And a corpsman is an enlisted member of the military that's part of the medical unit. And I think this as a whole shows that, how serious Elliot's injury was, and it shows just how prepared that the military is for injuries. And again, that goes back to the military code. You're supposed to, call the corpsman if need be. So it just shows another way to survive is through the corpsman. So the challenges, how this book or play challenges and reaffirms the American soldier, American identity, and America's identity is it challenges it because the American soldier isn't always American. Grandpa, Pop, and Elliot they're Puerto Rican. And we know this because Elliot talks about visiting Puerto Rico with his mom and his pop, or Ginny and his pop. And so, the American soldier isn't always American, it's a melting pot of places and a melting pot of people who are willing to fight for what is now their homeland. And also, it challenges the American soldier. We think of soldiers being always in battle, always seeing something exciting, and we see Pop on page 17 mention how war isn't always about fighting. There's a lot of waiting and boredom that's involved. So that challenges how soldiers don't always see fighting. Then we also see it challenges the American soldier. It shows the American soldier in the light that they might be a good guy, to them, but to other people they're bad guys, because we see that, in Vietnam and Iraq, Pop and Elliot kill their first soldiers and they're going through their belongings and they see that they have families too. So, they're not necessarily the good guy in this scenario, they're the bad guy. And then it reaffirms that, war is violent and dangerous because we see Elliot's wound, and then we see the American soldier. There's some romance that goes with it through Pop and Ginny, how they met in war. And then we also see the American war, American soldier being treated as heroes. And we see that really through the radio interview or the television interview that Elliot is doing throughout the play. A fugue. So the technical definition that I came up with was a composition of phrases introduced by one part or character and then taken up by others and developed by intertwining the parts. And it creates like this dissonance. So, in non-technical terms, it's this composition that starts in one voice and then another voice responds and adds to it, and then they tangle together and create this dissonance. And so this is important because the play is made up of fugues, where people or other characters narrate each other's actions and sometimes narrate their own. So this is how the play is put together by these fugues. And the playwriter's intention when using these fugues is to show the experience of 3 generations, and how they were similar. So you have Pop, you have Grandpop, and you have Elliot's and Ginny's experiences all coming together and kind of overlapping with these fugues. So like, for example, when Elliot gets injured, you also have Pop like relaying his experience of getting injured with him in the hospital and Ginny, and you also have their experience, all 3 of their experiences of first going off to war, and these fugues kind of overlapping how similar their experiences were or how they weren't similar. And then my 2 questions were you surprised that Elliot went back to war? And my second question is, what do you think the significance of Grandpop having Alzheimer's is? Do you think there's any significance to that? Thank you.